Welcome to Gossip About Gossip, powered by Hedera Hashgraph. In each episode, we'll cut through the hype of blockchain promises and explore real-world examples of organizations creating the next generation of decentralized applications, which will bring trust back to the internet for us all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Gossip About Gossip, the podcast where we talk about real-world applications for distributed ledger technology. My name is Zenobia Gottschalk, and I'm the SVP of Communications here at Swirlds Labs, helping to grow the Hedera ecosystem. Today, I am joined by longtime community member Guy Harrison. Guy, hello, how are you?
Hi, Zenobia. Hi, everybody.
So, Guy, I think, some of our community members may remember you from earlier conversations that we have had about one of your projects called ProvenDB. I think today we're probably going to talk about that as well as something else. Is that right?
Great. Yes, love to talk about both ProvenDB and my new project, AlwaysNFT.
All right, great. Well, why don't we start with ProvenDB? For those who don't know, can you give us background on what was the genesis of the project? And then maybe an update on where you've progressed since we last talked.
Sure. Well, ProvenDB has been around for a couple of years now. And the idea about ProvenDB is that I personally felt that databases didn't have the sort of trustability and verifiability that I would have liked as a sort of database professional working for many decades in various databases, Oracle, MySQL, MongoDB, and so forth. So when distributed ledger technology and blockchains came to my attention, I thought, this is fantastic. Finally, we have something where we can write something and we know for certain that no one's going to overwrite it, and we can always sort of go back to it and prove that this piece of data looked like this at this point in time. But unfortunately, blockchains, when we got started, which is sort of like a little bit pre-Hedera probably, didn't have the sort of like the performance and economics that would allow you to do that. I worked out once it would cost you about $15 million to store a gigabyte of data on Ethereum, for instance. And, some days it's probably 15 billion, because there's only a small amount of data you can put in every transaction.
Right.
So I thought the way to solve this was to build a database that was integrated with blockchains. Now, other people have done other things, tried to build databases that are blockchains and things like that. But I also wanted a database that was familiar to people. So I chose MongoDB as my database that I wanted to sort of like blockchainify, if you like. And we built an integration layer that changes MongoDB so that every piece of data is always kept. So normally you do an update and you replace the data that's in the database with something new, and the old thing's gone. But in our database, the old thing is still there. It's just a different version. Think of it like GitHub or something like that. When you put a new version of your code in, the old version's still there if you need it. Same thing with us. And then we integrated into the database a system that allows us to prove using digital signatures that prove the state of all of the database, part of the database, whatever you like, really. And we write that digital signature in a transaction to a blockchain or distributed ledger. So that's it in a nutshell. We've got a document management system on top of that if you don't want to, use database languages, or if you just want to sort of drag and drop something in, or you can email it in and so forth. And actually, Hedera themselves use this for some of your governance documents. You store them in ProvenDB compliance vault so that you can always prove that these documents haven't been changed, and you've got a blockchain proof of that. And so a few years ago, shortly after we got started, we announced support for Hedera because we were pretty attracted by Hedera's characteristics, and those just to sort of spell them out for everybody. Hedera differs from something like Ethereum in a couple of ways, from sort of like someone who's building something on it. One is that transactions are very fast. They typically come back within seconds. Now, Ethereum comes back within maybe 30 seconds, a bit more. Bitcoin within 12 minutes, but Hedera was, way ahead of those in terms of how quickly something would come back. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, the cost of each transaction is very predictable. It's pinned at 10 US cents, whereas in other blockchains, the price goes up and down depending on demand and depending on the exchange rate with the cryptocurrency. So I know I'm going on for a long time. I'll give you a second to butt in. But the one thing that really hit us hard in 2020 was when the Ethereum price went from 15 cents to $50 or something. And in a period of a few weeks, suddenly we were in this crisis where our costs of writing to the Ethereum blockchain just went through the roof.
Right.
And it's just for anyone who's got a business, that sort of like sudden increase, it'd be like petrol went to sort of like $200 a gallon or something. You just suddenly you can't drive your car anymore. And it's the same when you're using a blockchain that's got sort of like a variable pricing model that you run the risk that at some point it's just going to become too expensive to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have seen people, even though prices have come down, people have learned that lesson the hard way through 2021. And so, we're starting to see people pay more attention to that cost structure as they build, what they consider mission critical applications.
I think it was very clever for you to pin it in a fiat currency amount. From a business point of view, that's what you want to know. How much is this going to cost me?
Right.
And not in a cryptocurrency amount, but in an actual dollar amount. Now, maybe one day we'll all be using cryptocurrencies instead of, US dollars or what have you. But today, businesses, we all budget based on dollars. And so to know exactly how much it's going to cost today and, next month and so forth is really important. So actually, after the Ethereum price shock, we changed from Ethereum to Hedera as our default chain, and we pretty much convinced all of our customers to come along with us on that. And it was pretty easy to convince, really. The price
seems like a no-brainer when you're saying, hey, either your cost will go up 100x, or it will remain stable.
Well, we had to, so we had to hedge. So we charge people in US dollars as well. So we had to say you can use Hedera and it will cost you, $20 a month for a sort of like a reasonably sized database. Or if you want to use Ethereum, it'll be $50 a month. And also we'll delay Ethereum transactions at times if the price goes really high, because we sort of like bundle up a lot of data in single transactions, or we can. We don't really need to do it with Hedera, but with Ethereum, we do need to do it because we can't really afford to sort of like be paying the transaction costs. So all of our customers were able to sort of like see the sense in that. And so far, I haven't had anyone has completely balked. People often come in knowing what Ethereum is and not knowing what Hedera is. And so their initial inclination is to use Ethereum, but once it's explained the economics of the situation, they've all come along.
And what does that look like for your customer if they were previously on Ethereum and have now moved to Hedera? How painful or painless is that process?
It's completely painless. There's nothing that anyone needs to change. The only thing that a user would generally notice is in a proof. So in our system, every now and again, if you want to create a cryptographic proof of a piece of data or all of your data, so let's say you dropped your will in and you wanted to create a proof that your will was had been created at that time, sort of like notarizing it, really, making sure, stamping it with a sort of like a bit of blockchain to tell everyone that this is when the will was posted. No one can claim I changed it later. In the sort of raw cryptographic proof, there'll be a link to, it's Dragon Glass actually, just a link that shows you where the transaction is. And that link has gone from Etherscan to Ethereum to Dragon Glass. And that's the only thing that you'd notice. Okay. And likewise, in the proof certificates, which are a nice fancy, look a little bit like what you might get it from a notary, they will they have a little Hedera stamp on and explain what the Hedera blockchain is or the Hedera ledger is, and that this is where the proof has been gone to. So completely painless, less than painless really, because in fact your pricing has gone down. So it works really well. And we've been very happy with Hedera as a platform. It's been predictability, as I said before, is important. Not just predictability in price, but predictability in response time and uptime and all that sort of stuff. And you guys have maintained a very reliable system, which again for people who are using blockchains round the clock to do work, that's really important.
Yeah, actually being able to do the work, right? When you want to do it, when you want to record the transactions, et cetera.
Yes. So there are low-cost blockchains that seek to compete with Ethereum, and I guess Solana is a sort of like a good example of that, but which have had tremendous problems maintaining availability. And if you're trading NFTs on Solana, then maybe it doesn't matter. You try and trade it on a Saturday, it doesn't work, and so you trade it on Monday. You'll be annoyed, but you haven't gone out of business. But for us, that would be a 2-day outage in which none of our customers could do what they want to do with our product. And so it's just not on, right? It's just, I don't want to sort of like cast aspersions at any other technology, because I sort of love all technologies really. But that's sort of like what distinguishes Hedera for me is kind of like the seriousness of the sort of like the enterprise businessy focus. This has to be reliable. It has to be predictable. People are going to use this, for important things that their business might be mission critical for their business.
Right. And it does remind me of, early days of the internet, you sort of accepted the fact that some sites would go down for a certain amount of time. But as, the technology matured, the expectation was, now, you wonder if it's a DDoS attack, if a site is down, right? There is no, it's not acceptable for sites to be down, for services to be down. And so I think people have gotten used to that, 24/7, always available. And that has become the standard. And that should be the standard for, this next generation of platforms that applications are built on as well.
Yes. I'll give you another analogy about this. The way Bitcoin has been seen is as digital gold, right? So the blockchain there is there for people to, exchange gold and, long-term sort of store of value. But Ethereum, Hedera and other blockchains are more like digital oil, right? They're the sort of like the things that are powering work. And, that can't stop, that has to keep going or the work stops going. So, yeah, and totally agree. We're a 24/7 world, and there are no applications that have sort of like scheduled downtimes on Sunday afternoons or something anymore.
Right. Simpler times. So switching gears a little bit, you also have a project called AlwaysNFT. Tell us about that.
Sure, thanks. Well, AlwaysNFT is a storage solution for NFT owners. So your listeners may or may not, own NFTs, but what people who own NFTs are often mistaken in thinking that everything about the NFT is actually on the blockchain or the ledger. And just because, for the same reason I said before, that you can't really store sort of like megabytes of data economically on blockchains. Even Hedera doesn't have that capability at the moment. There's always some part of the NFT that's off-chain. And usually it's stored off-chain in this thing called IPFS, which is a great distributed storage solution that ensures that when things are stored in it, they can't change. So you get a link to something in IPFS, for certain that link will always resolve, if it resolves at all, to the exact thing that it referred to yesterday, because the link actually has a hash of the content in it. It's called content addressing. So that's all great, but unfortunately IPFS is kind of like a giant cache, and things sort of like can disappear out of it if people haven't looked at them recently. And a good NFT creator will make sure somehow that it stays in IPFS, either by running their own IPFS nodes or by paying for some third party to store it on their IPFS servers. But if they don't, and unfortunately a lot of them don't, keep paying for this, then your NFT artwork just sort of disappears over time. And so when you look at your NFT in your wallet, you'll just see a sort of like a image cannot be found icon or just a blank or something like that. And you might have paid, people are paying real money for NFTs, as upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. And to have the artwork that is associated with NFTs disappear would be heartbreaking. And, many studies have shown that, somewhere between 10 and 20% of NFT artwork is already can't be found or can't be found initially. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it is amazing. It's true that a lot of those missing NFTs are airdrops, like they're NFTs you didn't buy. So someone sends you an NFT that says, "Hey, buy my fancy real NFT," and the artwork to that sort of like disappears off the internet over like a month or so. But then it's still in your wallet. And you sort of like you've got this NFT, but you don't even know what it is at this point. So still, but there have been plenty of cases where real valuable NFTs. Artwork wasn't pinned because the developer was just a bit sort of like naive about the process or indifferent to what happens after they sold it. So we offer a service for owners where they can just register their wallet with us, and we'll scan the wallet, take all the NFT artwork and store it safely on IPFS servers that we maintain. Also to some third-party IPFS servers that we have a sort of like an arrangement with. And that way you can know that your NFT artwork can't possibly disappear. No matter what the developer did, you're safe. So whereas there are other solutions that are aimed at developers, helping developers pin their NFTs to make sure they don't disappear, our service is aimed at owners because owners are the ones who actually sort of like are the most economically motivated to make sure they don't disappear. A creator can create the NFT, sell it, and then their interest is gone, but an owner is presumably holding it for the long term.
So it's almost an insurance or proof of your entire collection that you can...
It is a bit like insurance. We don't replace it, like if someone steals it. So it's not totally insurance, but it's more like a fire suppression system in a gallery. It's making sure that things don't get destroyed. So I think you're motivated for the same reasons as you buy insurance, but that's for sure, because you've paid money for this. You want to make sure that money doesn't sort of like go nowhere. So you pay for something to sort of like protect your assets. It's free. Our service is free for up to 100 NFTs. So for a lot of people, they'll not need to pay anything. But at $20 a month will do it for between 100 and 1,000 NFTs. So it's pretty economical given what people are spending.
And if someone wants to use your service, do they just go to alwaysnft.com, or how do they engage with the service?
Yeah, alwaysNFT.cloud. Start there. Create an account, and then you can attach your wallet, or just give us the public address of your wallet, and we'll do the rest. And we've got a little dashboard where you can see all your NFTs in the one place and things like that. It's quite nice.
If you add NFTs to the wallet, do you then automatically capture those new ones, or someone has to go in and say, hey, I want to also add this to my service?
No, we do. We scan accounts every few days and add anything new.
Okay, so you make it super easy. They don't even have to think about going through that process.
Absolutely. Yep. No, it sort of couldn't be easier, really. Compared with the alternative, which is to try and find out the address of all of the IPFS addresses and manually sort of like add them to your own IPFS server. I mean, that's a sort of like a science project that would take me lots of time, and I'm deep in the weeds of how this stuff's all stored.
Yeah. And so what do you see, in terms of what's been your experience building that out? And then what do you see in terms of the evolution of that service going forward?
It's been interesting to me. I think I had the wrong impression about who NFT owners were. For some reason, I thought they were a bit like crypto owners who were sort of like very technologically sophisticated. But NFT owners actually come from a far broader audience. And so our toughest challenge has been to explain to NFT owners why they need this. And to do that, you've sort of got to understand the difference between on-chain and off-chain storage. And I think with some NFT owners, I think their eyes are just glazing over. They just don't understand what's being said. And because they're being bombarded from everywhere with offers and, like buy this and special things and scamming attempts. And so what they don't understand, they tend to ignore probably quite reasonably, right? So the people not understanding the need and the severity of the problem, I think, is the biggest non-technical hurdle we have to overcome. So I'm a technical guy, so, the technical challenges, I'm perfectly happy with. I just can't feel happier than when I've got a technical challenge and I'm trying to solve it. But those sorts of marketing challenges, which are far more in your line of work, I find those, deeply troubling.
Well, those are about making it simple for the masses, right? I mean, that is the biggest challenge of our entire industry, right? It shouldn't have to take 20 steps to do something. It shouldn't have to take, I mean, the number of times that I have, the number of times that you have to log into a wallet and associate it and do X, Y, and Z, which is all very logical, but is 30 steps, right? That's most people will not do that.
Yes, it's amazing. In a way, it's amazing that the number of MetaMask wallets that have been set up have occurred, because setting up a MetaMask wallet is a bit, it's not complicated, as you say, but, there's a lot of things you have to understand if you're really sort of going to trust it. And there are sort of plenty of other things that you may need to do to sort of like get on your journey to be an NFT owner. But we hope anyway that over the long term we'll form partnerships with marketplaces and so forth that can see the need to sort of protect their users, and we've had some conversations in the Hedera community about that as well. So that probably brings me to, again, we'll sort of like close the loop with Hedera, because we just announced support for Hedera a few weeks ago. Hedera NFTs, that is. Right. So now you can, if you've got a Hashpack wallet, or if you know your public account ID, which you should, you can just either attach with Hashpack or plug in your account ID. And again, we'll scan your assets and find all of the IPFS assets, or all of the media assets actually, and pin them to our servers. So that's exciting for us, because, in my other, role at ProvenDB, I've had a lot to do with the Hedera community. So it's great to be interacting with that. And Hedera's NFT marketplace is, although relatively smaller, it's thriving. There's a lot of energy around it, and a lot of new projects coming. So we're excited about that. And again, I feel somewhat based on my experience with Hedera in ProvenDB that Hedera has a lot to offer NFTs as they evolve. And by that I mean, today NFTs are sort of, they're speculative assets, really. I mean, most NFTs are connected with digital art, collectibles, maybe some sort of like passes to sort of special events and so forth. But, in the industry, we all believe, I think, that NFTs one day will be used for really, if I don't want to call it sort of like more serious, because collectibles are sort of like a big industry and serious in its own right, but we'll branch out into sort of like perhaps more mainstream activities, deeds and titles, and I do think an NFT will replace tickets to the movies or special events, everything that you want to sort of like have a provable digital asset. It just makes sense to represent that as an NFT, providing it can be done economically. And I think again, that's where Hedera's got a lot to offer in terms of making the pricing for NFT generation predictable, because the pricing, again, for minting NFTs on Hedera is totally predictable and very low compared with the alternatives. And, Hedera's penetration into enterprise markets, I think, puts it in a good position to exploit those form of NFTs when they arrive. And we'd like to be there as sort of like partners to help make sure that the off-chain storage is managed correctly.
Yeah, well, we just had Duncan Moore from Aberdeen on the podcast, and he was talking about how Aberdeen is planning to tokenize, essentially all of their assets, starting with a number of their funds. So to your point about more traditional asset classes being tokenized, Aberdeen is a $508 billion firm in terms of assets under management. And so I think when you start to think about, total assets tokenized, there are going to be important things that people need to be able to demonstrate, not just, hey, let me show you my collection, but let me demonstrate, what the sort of translation of real world assets is on this ledger.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. I didn't know about Aberdeen, but it's really going to make life better for people when those sorts of assets are controlled and fully transferable by you without having to go through sort of like brokers and all sorts of intermediaries. We have a situation with in my life where my wife owns some stocks that were bequeathed to her by her parents, and the paper trail is just sort of all gone away now. And like when it comes tax time,
right.
she's got no way of sort of like, where did these come from? She can't tell you, like, because no one bothered to
all of those things that need to be ideally associated with that asset.
Yeah. So in the modern world, this is the correct technology for those sorts of assets for sure, right? And we're on a sort of like a longish road of adoption for ledgers generally and NFTs specifically to become sort of like dominant within all verticals. But technology will win out in the long run. If something is technically superior and economically superior, then in the long run it's sort of bound to succeed, or at least that's my sort of like technophilic sort of belief. But that's, the history of the 20th century shows technology is winning out, over and over again, disrupting the old technologies, replacing the new. And sometimes it takes, a long time, and sometimes it takes a short time, but, it's kind of an inevitable march.
Yeah, I think the more value that is entrenched in the existing systems, a lot of times the longer it takes to make that transition. But, in some ways, the more valuable it is to make that transition.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a shock, like if when the old system is found to be deficient in some sort of like huge sort of global financial crisis type way. Those are the sorts of, GFC led to Bitcoin in some respects, and these things will happen again and again, and we'll eventually find ourselves forced to adopt better solutions to prevent sort of crises reoccurring. But even in the short term, the NFT market is huge, right? The amount of economic value and in cryptocurrencies and distributed ledgers, there's a huge amount of value tied up in these things, and it's only growing. The price of the cryptocurrencies goes up and down, which sort of gives the impression that it's sort of like the value is sort of like going down as well. But the economic value involved in blockchains and NFTs, that just keeps going up. The price of the individual crypto asset might drop, but the value that's sort of locked in is only increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. Guy, thank you for joining us today. Before we wrap up, any other thoughts? Where would you love to send people today for to check out both these projects?
Yes, thank you. AlwaysNFT.cloud. If you're an NFT owner, please come and check out. For a little while, we've got some special promotions that give you free 200 NFTs rather than 100, and some giveaways that you'd be in the running for. So, if you're an NFT owner, I can only encourage you to do that. And if you're looking for a database that's got the backing of Hedera, blockchain proofs to ensure integrity, tamper-proofing, check out ProvenDB at ProvenDB.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Guy. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and we hope you will continue to keep us updated.
I certainly will. Thanks, Zenobia. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Take care.
Bye-bye.